Hey, what's going on, guys? Mike here. Today we are talking all about the 33-gallon tank behind me. I know a lot of you guys are into this tank. It's definitely one of my favorite aquariums, and I just want to talk about everything. So if you're interested in setting up an aquarium that's like this, maybe using some of the same types of plants, whatever, that you just have as much information at your disposal as possible. This aquarium was set up almost 1 year ago. I think we started to do the dry start method at the end of June, if I believe so. So here we're at the beginning of May. It's getting really close to that 1 year mark. And this aquarium has taken on a lot of different forms. I'll try and overlay in as much of the old footage as I can right now of what the tank used to look like. I think we've gone through 3 different aquascapes, or ways that the tank has looked overall. This is the 3rd one. Reason for all those changes is, 1, my ADD kicks in. I have to change things up. I have to be looking at something new. And 2, because there was just something always new that I wanted to try in this aquarium and see if I could do it. And I thought it would look good. So hence all of the rescapes. The livestock in this aquarium has also changed a little bit as the rescapes have gone on. Not necessarily rescape related, but that's just another thing to keep in mind, is that just because you have one type of fish or you have one set of organisms in a tank doesn't mean you can't always change it later. For those of you that are new and you haven't seen those previous videos, I'll link them down in the description and kind of give you the timeline of what's gone on in this aquarium. This is of course a 33-gallon long type aquarium. It's 4 feet long. Not something that you're going to find all the time in big retail stores. Probably going to have to find one on Craigslist. The only big difference with this particular tank is that we removed the rim and then we braced it here in the center with a piece of glass. So this is just siliconed on. Whether or not that's 100% necessary is kind of up in the air. I'm one to think that we didn't 100% need this, but it's always good to have that peace of mind, especially when you have 33 gallons of water in your living room. The stand is also homemade and not the greatest thing ever. I mean, I've never been a guy who was really obsessed about making great stands. Let's look in here and see what we have filtering our tank. We have a Fluval 206 canister filter and some food and CO2 canisters. We'll look back down here in a second. But we also have a, what is this, an AquaClear hang-on back filter. So I'm not exactly sure what model it is, but I have a little bit of flow coming this way. That was the original filter on the tank before we added the canister filter to provide a little bit more flow. Water circulation is very important in freshwater aquariums. You're typically not going to hear about it as much when you compare it to saltwater aquariums, where flow is absolutely 100% important, but it's still an important factor for freshwater tanks, and you want to make sure that you have it. To light the aquarium, we have an LED up here. This is a 48-inch Phoenix Planted Plus SE fixture, not the latest model out there, but still a really good light. You can do a 24/7 mode, which I really like to do. That's not the case for this tank, but it's just an option that you have with this brand. I run this light on max power for about 8 hours a day, I believe, and then it shuts completely off. There's also a 150 watt Aquarium heater, and it keeps our tank at about 79 degrees, a temperature that I like a lot. You know, anything between 75 and 80 is going to be just fine for pretty much any tank that you have. I said we'd come back down here because I have to show off the CO2 system. So we have a paintball canister with an Aquatech mini regulator, which runs up here to the top. And we're just using a stainless steel diffuser. I really like these things, and they do a pretty good job. If you want to check out any of that gear that I just talked about, there will be links for them down in the description, as well as some of the other things in the tank that we're about to talk about next. Like I said earlier, this aquarium has gone through a tremendous amount of changes over the last year. Initially, we set it up with the Glosso carpet. That plant is the foreground plant that you see here, and we started it as an immersed setup. So we didn't have any water in the tank. We planted this plant down in the substrate, and then we sprayed it down with water. We covered it with saran wrap, and we let the plant grow for about a month before we actually filled the tank up. And we did that for a couple different reasons. One, because this plant is not one that's super easy to grow, especially when you take it from the state that you're going to get it in when you first buy it. So doing the immersed setup can help to get the plant established and get you a carpet before you even fill the tank up. The carpet is something that everybody wants to have, it seems like, these days in their aquarium, but it can be a little bit of a challenge depending on what plant you use. Initially, I also added in some hair grass, just kind of sprinkled it around this area, and you can see it is now spread kind of throughout this entire portion of the tank. and then it ends about halfway here. We start to see it thin out a little bit, and that's just kind of created a unique look over here of the mix between the hairgrass and the glosso, one that I really like. And then just recently, a couple of weeks ago, we added in some Monte Carlo, which is this plant right here. It's kind of hard to tell the difference, but there's some subtle differences there. There's some over here that is looking a little beat up, but it's still transitioning, so I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt. But hopefully these three carpeting plants will sort of blend together and help to create that nature aquarium vibe that I'm going for now with this scape. Also, on that most recent rescape, we added in the spiderwood pieces here. There's about 2 pieces that make up the right side, and then 1 piece over here that makes up the left. The wood sticks up out of the tank and blocks my cellular pathways poster a little bit, but that's okay. I still think it looks really good. And that's really it. What else here? There's a Marimo moss ball in here that doesn't need to be here. I just put it there for fun like a month ago and forgot about it. Let's get that out of here. And then the only other plant that we have in here is the Hygropenita Phyta. Now this is a plant that I really like, and up until recently, I hadn't really been able to get it to grow that well. So through experimenting with different fertilizers and stuff, I was able to get it right where I want it, and I transferred some of it over from my Blue Dream shrimp tank and put it in here, and I think it looks really good. We do need to trim it though. We do need to do some maintenance on this whole tank, and we'll do that here in just a second. I almost forgot we did add some Christmas moss. Actually, this is probably a mix of Java moss and Christmas moss that we've super glued to the wood. I think it also helps to give it a pretty cool look. I almost forgot to talk about one of the most important things in this aquarium, especially when you're going to be trying to grow a really nice carpet, is the substrate. So in this tank, we have a bottom layer of earthworm castings to provide a really good nutrient-rich, specifically nitrogen-rich substrate, and then on top, we have the portion that you can see, because you can't really see the earthworm castings, they're packed down there, but this top layer is Akadama. Akadama is a hard-fired clay that's mined in Japan. It can be kind of expensive to get your hands on, but I think it's really worth it. It has a really high cation exchange capacity, which, to put it in layman's terms, just means that it's a really good nutrient sponge. So any nutrients that are free floating in the aquarium can go down and bind to that, and as well as nutrients down from the substrate that get mixed in. So it's a really good substrate, and I think lends to really getting the most out of a carpeting type plant. You can see that in some areas there's kind of a little bit of it, and then as we zoom over here, there's more of it. I'm never super precise when it comes to substrate layers. I think that people just worry about it too much. So I guess my advice there would be, don't think about it too much. Just, you know, do half an inch, an inch. Just keep it consistent with whatever you're using. Before we talk about the livestock and some of the ways that I've helped keep algae down in this nature aquarium, let's go ahead and let's do a little bit of maintenance on the tank while we talk about it and get this tank looking a little bit more neat. The first thing that I want to do is I want to trim this Pinita Phyta. It decided to grow up really tall here, but I want it to stay low and compact. Right now it's kind of shadowing and hiding a lot of the features of the wood that I want to be able to see. So I'm just going to come down in here and I'm going to make cuts fairly low on the plant. And we'll get rid of some of these tall vertical growths. So I'm just gonna come around here. Maybe I'll cut this one right here. I'm just cutting it above nodes. So if you can see that right where the scissors are, it's a few centimeters up above where a node is. And when we cut that, the plant is gonna shoot out 2 new growths right here. Help keep it a little bit more bushy to achieve the look that I want. Here's an after shot post trimming, so we can see a lot more of the wood and the moss that's in there, and it just kind of opens everything up. We can always replant the top pieces that we cut, but in this tank we're already kind of running out of room, so I'm probably just gonna either give these to a friend or go put them in one of my other tanks. So now let's go ahead and do the same thing to the left side. And don't be afraid to cut things really low, because you'll still get some growth coming back. Here's a shot of the left side, all trimmed up. I think it looks pretty good. Now, I do want to say there's a lot of people out there, including myself from time to time, that really love the look of a super overgrown tank, or a jungle tank, as a lot of people like to call it. You might know that my jungle tank over in the aquarium lab next to the desert tank is a jungle themed tank, which is also a jungle tank, I guess, because it's super overrun. Sorry if that was confusing. But that's an example of a look that a lot of people like. Just let the plants do their things. Don't trim anything and just let nature do its thing. That's fine. That's great. But trimming plants, specifically plants like the Pinnatifida, will really help get you an even better look to your tank. Or, you know, if that's what you're going for. It's always subjective and it just depends on what you want to do, but just know that trimming plants is also really healthy for them. It lets in a lot of light down to the lower portions and you can get that bushy look from stem plants that you want to have. And it'll even help your carpet to do what you want it to do, which is what we're going to do next. So let's pick up our scissors here. Let's check this out over here on the right side, and pretty much everywhere there's areas where there's tall glosso. So I'm just going to come down in here and make a bunch of cuts. And try not to snip any fish. We don't want that. I've trimmed this carpet so many times, it used to freak me out because I let it grow too long, and then when you do cut it, you basically just see stems and a whole lot of yellow, and it can freak you out, especially when you love looking at your tank, but you know you need to do something about it because it's just getting a little too crazy. It can be kind of risky, or you can be scared. I've definitely been there, right? So as long as you make cuts that aren't too low, you're probably going to be fine. Again, it really just depends on the plant. Some plants, like this glosso, you can cut super low and it'll come back. But others, it's tough. And I wish I could give you the answer to everything, but I certainly don't. I don't have the answer to everything, guys. I can just share with you my experience with the plants and tanks that I've had and hope that you get what you're looking for. We didn't do anything too crazy in here as far as trimming in the substrate because it was only like, I think a handful of weeks ago, I did a really big aggressive trim of the glosso, and that's why we have all these patches here, and that's why we added in the Monte Carlo to a few places to kind of help spread things out a little bit quicker. Now let's go ahead and net all of this plant debris out of here. Now that is a lot better. Still not perfect, but we'll try and get the rest of it when we do a water change here in just 1 second. But now let's talk about algae and kind of maintaining the tank, hopefully with not a ton of work, because I mean, if there's anything that I hate is a tank that requires a ton of work all the time. We've all had them. We've also had tanks where we don't have to do a lot of work and things just work out really well. And so those are the aquariums that you really want to pay attention to what you did so you can try and recreate it. Now with this aquarium, we're kind of like halfway. I don't do any kind of really structured water change on this tank. I just kind of do it as I see fit, which turns out to be maybe once a week. So how do I keep this tank from not turning into a giant algae ball? Algae is one of those things that you can either have a lot of, a little of, or can pop out of nowhere. But the important thing is that you just want to try and deal with it and get to a point where the amount of algae you have in the tank doesn't ruin the feel of it. In other words, you don't have algae completely covering this glass, you don't have algae that's covering the plants and hindering their growth, etc. So what we want to do is just kind of find a balance where we have the right type of algae and only that type of algae. That sounds kind of weird, but you're always going to have algae in your aquarium no matter what, guys. Okay, and so for this aquarium, we have very little algae on any of the plants. And that's because, one, the tank is, you know, quote unquote balanced. I kind of hate that term these days because I feel like it's just an excuse for I don't really know what's going on. It's like, okay, my tank is doing good because, yeah, it's balanced. Like it's the perfect scapegoat for why, right? Like, or why the tank's doing really bad. It's because it's not balanced. But what does that even really mean? Well, to me, the way I take it is that, like, is your tank mature? Okay, but also that's sort of abstract too, right? This tank is mature, it's a year old. The substrate, the bacteria, everything in this tank has had a lot of time to kind of fit into its groove and do what it wants to do. Yeah, every time that we rescaped it, we kind of throw things for a loop and we introduce that change. That can create some problems, but if you just pay a lot of attention and do your due diligence, do your maintenance, then it can really help to keep things in line. So for me in this tank, I have algae. Okay, I don't have it in the places where I don't want it, but I do have it in places where I don't really mind it, which is on the glass. So you see the sidewalls are an area where I don't really clean that much, and on both of those you can't even I mean, you can see through it, but it's not that great, okay? It's not good. If I didn't scrape the front, I would have that on the front of the glass. Most people do have algae on the front of their glass because that's a really easy place for algae to grow. So I just use a MagFloat magnet scrubber here. It does a really good job. But for some of the tight areas like the back around this wood, it can be tough, okay? Same with the front down here. What do? I use a toothbrush, okay? Just a toothbrush. We get in here, I'll do the sidewall for an example here, and just kind of, applying not super hard pressure, but we can clean all of this algae off, and it doesn't take that long. This is obviously a spot where we can use the magnet scrubber. This is, just an example, but like the corners here, the toothbrush works really, really well as down here in the front. So I love my toothbrush. I use this thing all the time. The only thing that you want to be careful of is not getting any substrate debris or, like sand. If you have a sand substrate, you want to make sure you don't kick up sand and get it into the bristles, because you can scratch your glass, and nobody wants to do that. So just be careful when you do it. Super valuable tool. It definitely helps to lower the water level, especially when you're in here doing this. But I think I got pretty much everything really good. I mean, there's definitely some spots where there is still algae. We just do our best. I did a particularly good job this time, and I'm a little proud of myself. You did a good job when your shoulder hurts, right? But the last thing, you guys might have noticed it, there's a little bit of a white film down here, a slimy film on the wood, probably a bacterial thing. Not a huge deal. It doesn't impact our environment in a negative way, but I'm going to go ahead and see if I can try and get rid of it with the toothbrush here, just because it's a little unsightly. Spiderwood's notorious for getting a big fungal bloom on it as soon as you put it in, covered in a white fuzzy material, which is actually just a bunch of fungal cells. But this is something that looks a little bit different. So we're just going to take care of it. It might come back, it might not. We'll see what happens. Now it's time to water change, guys, okay? Whenever we do anything big in our tank, cleaning wise, we always want to finish it off with a water change. So in this case, what did we do? We trimmed stuff, we got a bunch of algae suspended in the water from cleaning it off the glass, and now we want to just finish it up with a nice, probably close to 80% water change. Don't be scared of big water changes. They're great for your tank and everybody in it, okay? This tank is going to really appreciate it, and we're going to go ahead and start that now. So we have the heater unplugged, and we wait a few minutes to make sure that it's cold. We also have the canister filter and the hang-on back filter turned off. And now it's time to drain the tank. So for the longest time, I didn't use one of these pythons. I have it hooked up over here to the sink, and I mean, it changed my life. For the longest time, my tanks were really far away from my kitchen, and I guess I just didn't think it would be worth it to have one of these things. And I had easy access to outside, so I could just drain it right outside. But now that I have tanks inside, this thing has changed my life, and I love this thing. So if you don't have one, make sure that you do have one next time you change your water. A question that I get a lot is, do you vacuum your substrate, or do you do this to your substrate to get all the debris out? You can see that there's quite a bit there. A lot of that is just akadama, but there is debris down there, okay? And the answer is I kind of do. So I do this just lightly on the substrate to get debris out, but I don't do it every time that I do a water change. So it depends on the tank. A tank that has a really thick carpet, it can trap quite a bit of debris down there. But a lot of times in planted aquariums, doing this kind of vacuuming of the substrate isn't 100% necessary. And I've definitely had tanks where I never did it for a long time, and that tank was still really successful. Whenever I fill up my tanks, I always like to let a little bit of air into the chamber here to really oxygenate the water. It also helps to gas off a little bit of the chlorine, but we always want to add in the appropriate amount of dechlorinator while we do so. That should be good. I'm lucky because where I live, there isn't a ton of chlorine in the water. Other places, there can be a lot of chlorine or even chloramines that are not good for your fish, so you definitely need to have some type of stuff. I just use API tap water conditioner though. I used to be a big proponent of filling the tank up really, really slowly to try and just put less shock on the environment, but to be honest with you, I don't really see that much of a difference, especially when you're adding in water that's pretty much the exact same temperature. So I can regulate that, I can check that, and I don't think there's any issue with filling up really, really slow or, you know, moderately fast like I'm doing right now. But that's just my opinion. Last but not least, when you're done with your water change, don't forget to Windex the front of your glass to make sure it looks really good. Windex, sponsor me. Don't get any of the Windex in your tank though. That is not good. But with that pretty much concludes the maintenance that I do on this tank. And again, not on a weekly basis. I do not do this once a week, like, you know, every Wednesday or whatever. I do things as I see fit. Like this aquarium, because it's so mature and fairly balanced, right? That term again. I don't need to do this all the time to keep it looking like this. So that's the goal. I think that's the goal for all of my tanks, is make it look as good as possible and then get it to where it doesn't require a lot of maintenance, or get it to require the least amount of work to have it looking that good. So I'm happy with it. You know, it's not the best tank ever. The carpet is still coming back, so it doesn't look perfect to me, in my eyes at least. But and you know, it might not look perfect to you either. It's not supposed to look perfect. It's supposed to be what you want it to be. And whatever your tank, however your tank looks, if you enjoy it and you like it, well, then that's a great scape. I've said it a million times, you know, I'm not a professional aquascaper, nor do I really aspire to be one. I just aspire to get better at aquascaping in my own eyes, and to always try and create a tank that I think is going to look better than some of the other tanks that I've made in the past. So it doesn't matter if you're really good at aquascaping or you're not really good at aquascaping, whatever that means. It's all about what you want. Make a tank that you enjoy, because that's all that matters. So anyway, we got everything fired back up, all our filters, our heater, everything is good. Check, check, check. One thing that I didn't do, which I really never do, is clean my filters out. The only cleaning of the filter I ever do is the input, so the canister input. I clean that off, I get debris off of it. Same with the hang-on back filter. And the hang-on back filter, I don't clean at all. I got a really good bacterial colony in there. It's been one that's been with this tank for the year that it's been set up for. The canister filter is a little newer, and they can decrease their flow rates quite a bit with the filters clogging up. So that's a filter that I do clean, but I don't clean them very often, guys. I mean, whenever I notice that the flow is significantly lower than it should be is when I get into those filters. Beyond that, I never clean them out. Okay? Only when it absolutely has to be done to maintain a semi-decent flow rate. And that's important because you want your bacterial colony to be as mature as possible, or as old as possible, because those bacteria know this tank better than any of us do. Okay? They control most of what's going on in here. Okay? We don't. So we want to keep them happy and healthy by not disturbing them. So only mess with your mechanical filtration media, never your biological. Okay, so this video is probably way too long. So in the interest of time, we're gonna hit on the fish that are in this tank right now, and the shrimp and stuff, and why that's helped, and then we're gonna be done with it, okay? So in this tank, we have cherry barbs. That is not the only fish that we have in here. They're breeding, they're doing really good. I don't know how many are in here at this point, but it's not a ton of fish. Okay, there's not a ton of fish in this aquarium. We have, what, like 2 Siamese algae eaters? There's 1, so that's gonna be a good algae eating fish, hence the name. Pretty decent at getting rid of blackbeard algae while they're young, before they start to become the giant water pigs that they eventually end up being, but this one's still pretty good. And then I have like 1 Cory cat in here. I should have more. They don't like to be alone, but he was just a transfer that made it over from one of my other tanks. And then besides snails, invertebrate wise, we just have a mono shrimp. Okay, so there's a big fat snail there. I feed them to my pufferfish over in the aquarium lab. That's always handy, but my population isn't as big as it used to be, which is kind of a bummer. I don't know where the Amanos are right now. They were swimming around here like crazy when I changed the water, but that is the only other thing that I have in this aquarium. And they're really good at eating algae, all types of algae, and they've really helped me to keep the algae low in this tank. When I had an algae problem in the beginning when I set this tank up, we added a ton of them in here, and it helped the problem basically right away. So if you ever have an algae problem and you want to try and get rid of it with livestock or in a natural way, get your hands on some Amano shrimp. There's a link for them down in the description. Wink, wink. I think my biggest tip though for anybody that wants to start an aquarium, whether it's planted or it's not or whatever, is just like focus on the environment that you're building before you go and get a bunch of fish. I think what people want to do is they want to set up a tank because they really want to get some fish, but try and reel in your excitement a little bit and focus in on the environment that you're trying to create. Okay, so that sort of means like, yeah, like plant your tank because it helps tremendously. It always looks really good no matter what, and it's gonna help make everything so much easier. Okay, your tank is gonna love you, your fish is gonna love you if you plant it, but focus on that environment. Set up a tank, plant it, don't put any fish into it. Maybe start out with you know, something like a mono shrimp, just a very light fish load, just a couple of fish, and really focus in on making the environment what it needs to be to sustain more fish, because ultimately more fish equals more food, which can equal more problems, algae, a whole lot of other things if you don't have your environment right. So focus in on your environment, your little ecosystem you're building before you jump into getting a ton of fish. Whoa, guys, I'm sweaty. That was a lot of work. If you have any questions about this tank, if I didn't answer something that you're wondering about, drop it down in the comments. I'll try my best to get to it, okay? But I think I covered pretty much as much as I could think of, which was a lot. All right, my brain is fried. I've been doing this for too long. So I'm gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new, consider subscribing. Hit the notification bell too, so you know when I upload the next video. Thank you so much. Don't forget to check out AQUAPROS shirts. They're new. Let me know if you like the new logo, etc., etc. I'm out of here. We'll see you next time, guys. Thanks again.